during the festival, and it was interesting. I like ancient literature, even things outside of the Bible. And the Mishnah, which is sort of a written record of the oral tradition of the Pharisees, it says this: there was not a courtyard in Jerusalem which was not lit up from the light. So, I mean, this is sort of a big, I've never been to Jerusalem, but I kind of picture, the temple's there, and it's a lot of light coming out of this. It's sort of in the midst of this thing, and as, maybe it's winding down. In the midst of it, Jesus is there at the temple, and he says in John 8, starting verse 12, Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. And then, of course, the Pharisees had something to say about that. They often do, right? And the Pharisees say, you're making these claims about yourself. Such testimony is not valid. And they were really kind of concerned, he doesn't have the right credentials. Like, okay, you're saying these things. And, Jesus didn't fit the mold that the Pharisees wanted, if you know the story at all, or if you read it much. And, Jesus seemed to have a particular enjoyment out of healing on the Sabbath, because they said he couldn't, because they didn't get it. Jesus tended to spend times with, I love how, one passage says notorious sinners, because not just the sinners, it's the notorious ones. And, he taught in a way that really exposed how the Pharisees misunderstood the law. And so Jesus tells them, hey, these claims are valid even though I make them about myself. For I know where I came from and where I'm going, but you don't know this about me. You judge by human standards, but I do not judge anyone. If I did, my judgment would be correct in every respect because I'm not alone. The Father who sent me is with me. Your own law says that if two people agree about something, their witness is accepted as fact. I am one witness, and my Father who sent me is another. So Jesus makes these big claims about himself. And who is Jesus? And a lot of people, and again, you go to the internet, because that's where we find all our good answers, right? Like if you, and if it's on the internet, it has to be true, or all those posts, everyone's like, this is true, I saw it on MSNBC, and, and they post some crazy thing on Facebook. I don't know. Some of you know what I mean. Some of you are the people who post it. But Jesus, some would say, he's a good man. Or have you heard a magician, a prophet, maybe just a fairy tale? We had a conversation. Men's group was we always have interesting discussions on Saturday. And, there's some people who are like, oh, Jesus never existed. And it's, well, no, there's a lot of reasons we think Jesus existed. There's so much ancient evidence. Even like historians who don't believe Jesus is who we believe he is, believe he existed because, there's so much evidence. But, but here's the thing. If Jesus is who he says he is, it's significant for us. And C.S. Lewis popularized this trilemma, if you will, of he's a lunatic, a liar, or Lord. So Jesus had some very specific things to say about who he is. And so you either think he's crazy and deranged, a liar, or he is who he says he is, and he's Lord. And if he is who he says he is, we should live fully for him. And, we've said salvation is free, but it'll cost you everything. And you'll truly find yourself in him. And so Jesus stands in the temple courts. He declares that he is the light. And he said, hey, you want two witnesses? Dad and I testify. And I love this because there's always these hints of things. And if you read on in verse 19, it says, where is your father, they asked. And Jesus answered, since you don't know who I am, you don't know who my Father is. If you knew me, you would also know my Father. And Jesus made these statements while he's sitting there in the temple. And, there's kind of these paternity questions, if you will, that they kind of linger in Jesus' ministry if you read between the lines, that, they didn't understand the Christmas story. They didn't understand that he comes from that. And so they don't understand who Jesus is. But John tells us, and really, I think one year I preached the Christmas story out of John. It's John tells the story a little differently. In John chapter 1, starting in verse 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. God sent a man, John the Baptist, to tell about the light so that everyone might believe because of his testimony. John himself was not the light. He was simply a witness to tell about the light. The one who was the true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. And Jesus heals a lot of people. If you read through the Gospels, the stories of the life, he heals a lot of people, often out of just compassion for them, often to make a point, though. And this is where it's tough, because kind of picking what to talk about with this Jesus light. Chapters 7, 8, and 9 are sort of one continuous scene. And if I were to preach chapters 7, 8, and 9, you guys know how I can go on about a little verse. This would be a lot of verse. It would be a very long sermon, a bit too long for most of us. So we're going to skip ahead a little and read in John chapter 9. We're starting in verse 1. And I'm going to read the story, but I might summarize and skip around a little bit if you're following along, because it is a long passage. But it's a cool story. And so in John chapter 9, it says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? Now, was this awkward? I mean, he was blind, not deaf. And you kind of wonder how many times he's heard this conversation, people making some sort of thing. And was it his fault that he was born blind? I mean, can you sin in utero? Step on your mom's bladder too many times when she eats spicy food. I don't know. Make her sick. I don't know. Or the parents sin, And then the parents would walk around feeling guilty, right? I sinned, therefore my kid, had this problem. And that's real. There are some physical realities. People can do some things that do harm kids. Like if you're addicted to drugs, that's difficult for your child, obviously. And, but ultimately, the parents are kind of stuck with this, is it the kid's fault or my fault? And they can't really point to a person and say they deserved it, right? That's karma. That's a different team. That's not Team Jesus, not Team Bible. And then I like this, Jesus enters the chat, if you will, because he's finally going to weigh in on this. We're going to finally get the answer. And I love how he just kind of cuts the debate short. And he goes, it's not because of his sins or his parents' sins. Kind of like, they might have a bunch, right? This happens so the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the tasks assigned to us by the one who sent us. The night is coming and no one can work. But while I'm here in the world, I am the light of the world. God is often at work in ways we can't see, right? And, he works through this man's blindness. And, he uses the tough situations in life sometimes that any of us are in to ultimately reveal himself to others. And then the story continues. He spits on the ground. He makes mud with his saliva and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. Now, if you've been in church long enough, this is normal. The story where Jesus spits on the ground. But this is the first time that I know of. And can you imagine being there the first time? I mean, it's like, what does it sound like to the man? He's finally defended, and he hears the guy spit. How many times do you have to spit to make mud? I mean, he did fishes and loaves, so maybe he just spits once, and it's really big. And, why does he do this? And there's all kinds of questions to that, And, he's hearing the spit. He's like, well, at least it didn't hit me when he spit. And then Jesus starts rubbing it on. And I'm not trying to be irreverent. I'm just saying this is a unique thing, right? And, you imagine, you've never been to the doctor and had him spit on you, have you? Not intentionally. This is anyway. So Jesus makes mud, smears it on the guy, and he goes, go and wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. Siloam means sent. And so the man went and washed and came back seeing. And so now the guy could see. And, it's interesting. Jesus was sent by the Father. Jesus sent to the pool called Sent. Jesus sent the man to a pool called Sent, and then so he could eventually be sent to the world. So just something I was thinking this week. And so the man goes and washes, and he has his faith and obedience. And, he had to have blind faith. And come on, that was good. But you picture, and, you see, and I don't know what it's like to see for the first time. You know, sometimes we see those videos where people can like see color for the first time or different. It's like this amazing sort of thing. And I don't know if he like his first sight is like when he's washing himself in the pool, does he look down and like, is there a reflection? Or do you see the pool? Or do you know, like, and you've never seen, trees before, you've just heard about them and now you see them. And it would have to be this amazing kind of moment, right? Like a man who's born blind, never seen anything, and suddenly he could see. And it's, you kind of imagine he's sort of probably telling everyone, right? Like, and everyone's like, and so it says neighbors and others who knew him as a blind beggar, because there weren't a lot of options then. There wasn't like a society for the blind, and there weren't a lot of options. He wasn't working on computers or anything. And it says, they asked, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? And some said he was, and they asked, nah, he just looks like him. Like, it kind of looks like that guy, but, and I was thinking, like, is it his evil twin? Like, is that what they're thinking? Like, is this like a first century soap opera, The Young and the Hebrew, All My Meshuggahs, As the Torah Turns, Days of Our Chaims? Sorry. Little, got to know a little Hebrew culture in there, but he keeps going. Hey, I'm the same one, not my evil twin. And they ask, or they're seeing twin. He wouldn't necessarily be evil, but in soap operas, it's always an evil twin. I don't know why. Like some of us are twins. Is it you or your brother is the evil one? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. No. He's kind of, and they're asking, who healed you? Well, what happened? Because this is not a normal thing. He was born blind. He's been blind the whole time. Now he's not blind. We got to figure out what's going on here. And they're not sure. And so they bring him to the Pharisees. If you read on to the story, and here's the thing: it was a Sabbath, right? Because again, Jesus likes to heal on the Sabbath to irritate Pharisees, apparently. And so, and they go to the Pharisees and they're like, the Pharisees asked the man all about it. And so he told them, he put the mud on my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see. And the Pharisees, this man is not from God, for he's working on the Sabbath. Their big concern is not that the miracle happened, but when it happened. And others said, well, how can an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? And so there's this deep division of opinion between them, right? Like some people are like, oh, Team Jesus. Other people are like, ooh, Team Sabbath. We don't like this. And, I'm pretty sure Jesus heals on the Sabbath on purpose often because to make a point. And, elsewhere he says, people weren't made for the Sabbath was made for people. Sabbath is a good thing, but people were getting it for the wrong, getting the idea of it for a wrong reason. And so Jesus broke the rules. He made mud. He healed. And they're less concerned with the miracle than if it broke a rule. Here's the thing. They knew the law, but they didn't understand the purpose of the law. They loved the law of God, but they didn't love the God of the law. They didn't understand its purpose. And so it says the Pharisees question the man, and he's like, what's your opinion about this guy who healed you? He's like, I'm guessing he's a prophet or something. Like, this is not something that normally happens. And then the Jewish leaders still refused to believe the man had been blind and can now see. And I don't know how you prove I used to be blind when they think there's an evil twin going around. And they're like, hey, is this your son? Is he born blind? If so, how can he see now? And the parents are like, well, we know this is our son, and we know that he was born blind, unless he ran this long game con for, since a baby. It's, we don't know how he could see or who healed him. Ask him. He's old enough to speak for himself. And his parents did this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. And that's why they said, he's old enough, ask him. He's old enough. He's out of youth group, he's out of high school, he's turned 18. I don't know what the age was then in our culture. We're like, you're 18, you can make some of your own decisions. Although kids are staying home longer and longer, and it's more like you're 30, you can move out of the house now. And so they call him in again, and they're like, hey, we know this man's a sinner, and I don't know that he was a sinner. All I know is I was blind and I can see now. And they're like, what did he do? How did he heal you? He's like, look, dude, I went over this before. There's mud. He spits on it. He rubs it on my eyes and wash it off. You kind of picture him kind of frustrated now, like a sarcastic tone. Man born blind sees Jesus as not a sinner. The Pharisees who are blind to who Jesus is. It's sort of this kind of a funny thing going on here. And they cursed him. He said, you're a disciple, but we're a disciple of Moses. God spoke to Moses. We don't even know where this man came from. yeah, he's like, that's strange. He healed my eyes. You don't even know who he is. And he's like, you're a total sinner. And they throw him out of the synagogue. And so this is like good day, bad day. Like, you ever have one of those? Like, good things happen, bad things happen. Like, you get a new job, but your car breaks down on the way to the job. Some of you are like, that was too much of a nod, like you've had that happen. It's still a good day if you can afford a new car, but there's good and bad in every day. This is like a good day though, because this is a life-changing thing. Like, yeah, the synagogue, most of us don't think much of that. You get kicked out of this church, there's another one down the street, right? But it was kind of a big deal then. And so, when Jesus heard what happened, he found the man. He asked, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man answered, "Who is he, sir? I want to believe in him." He said, "You have seen him, and he is speaking to you." "Yes, Lord, I believe," the man said, and he worshiped Jesus. And really, there's this interesting progression of faith in the man. He understood, Jesus is a man. He recognized him as a prophet. Then he recognized, hey, this has got to be some sort of man of God. And finally, he worships him. It shows, his growing faith. And, and often I think all of us have faith that comes in steps. It was funny, I was sharing with somebody yesterday, like how I came to faith and everything, and you're kind of remembering it, and it's like, I had moments where, like, you're kind of like, oh, God definitely convicted me of something there. But it was, for a lot of us, it's this gradual journey of faith where there's these moments and things. Some of us have those instantaneous, like, awesome, like Paul, Saul of Tarsus, Jesus shows up, you're blind, you can see, all kinds of cool. But others sort of like this disciple moments where the disciples seem to get it sometimes and not get it other times. And so you're working it through there. And, often faith comes in steps, but ultimately the journey of faith should lead us to understanding who Jesus is, and he's Lord. And that is the light he brings. And Jesus says this, he says, and I told him, "I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think they see that they are blind." And some Pharisees were standing nearby and heard him and asked, "Are you saying we're blind? Are you dumb too?" No. "If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty," Jesus said, "but you remain guilty because you claim to see." And then it brings us back to that verse. "I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life." Jesus is the light. And the light will change your life. C.S. Lewis said, "I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun is risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else." Jesus is this life-changing light. When we walk in light, we'll follow him. When we follow him, we reveal the light to others. Jesus said in Matthew 5, "You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. Instead, the lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." You are the light of the world. I have to, every time I read this, I sing in my head, "Hide it under a bushel." No. Anyone else? That was like the only thing I remember from Sunday school as a kid. It's, "I'm going to let it shine. This is why I'm not on the worship team." I really, it's, I think if you kind of get these images with this light, there's a candle in the darkness. Like, we do the candlelight Christmas Eve service, and it's really pretty. Everyone shows up, and you light a little candle, and it's amazing how much light comes from a candle, right? And when you light a candle, it pierces the darkness. I've never seen the darkness overcome light. Light always overcomes darkness. And it's this beautiful moment, and kind of, I think the picture we have here, sometimes we get, I got to let my light shine. And that's true. Like, each of us individually have to let our light shine. But it's interesting if you, the New Testament's written in Greek, and it actually says here in the, I think the New Texan translation has it better, "Y'all are the light of the world." or North Carolina or whatever, Southern Delaware, wherever you are. Or Pittsburgh, "Yins is the light of the world." Whatever there's like, English struggles to have plurals except regionally apparently. But, it's really this, we all are the light of the world. And so if you're a believer and a follower of Jesus, then we are light to the world. And Philippians 2:15 says this. It says, picking up part B, it says, live clean, innocent lives as children of God, shining like bright lights in a world full of crooked and perverse people. And we have this purpose, we have this life, we have this new way of living, and we're supposed to be like reflectors of the light. You know, it's, you know, like, remember, you know, bikes, remember they had reflectors on them? I think mine still has reflectors on it, because I can still ride at night, I don't know. I've had a few accidents, I'm kind of amazed that the reflectors are still on it. But, you know, like, we reflect the light back to the world, you know, and we live differently because we've been redeemed and regenerated. And so our lives should look differently, and we become people who are followers of Jesus. And then ultimately that means that we're people who engage the world. You know, you live differently at school. And so you're a light to the world at the school. You live differently in your workplace, whether you're the employee or whether you're the employer. You know, you should be a better employee because you're a person of faith. You should be a better manager and employer because you're a person of faith. And again, we let this light shine in your community, in your neighborhood. When you're light, people see Jesus through you. Jesus is light. To those who are lost, he is seeking out. He gives us new life and new destiny. Jesus is the light of the world. You know, I think, were you scared of the dark as a kid? Anyone? Like, it just seems like it's a universal thing for some people. I don't know. Like, I think a lot of us, we're scared of the dark because we don't know what's out there, right? Like, there's this hiddenness, and it's scary. And I think, you know, Jesus ultimately, you know, reveals things with his light too. Because sometimes we have sin and we have stuff in our life that we need to escape from. And Jesus' light will reveal that in us. And he doesn't reveal it like in a way to condemn you, to show everybody else, and, you know, for condemnation. But Jesus reveals things in our lives so that he can heal it. So he can teach us to turn from it. To give us new life. And Jesus, you know, he convicts us so that we can live differently. You know, Jesus reveals our sin but shows love and compassion, forgiveness, this new way of life. This Easter season, we pray you'll see his light and follow his way this season. We ask ourselves, you know, here's something to ask yourself and contemplate. Are there areas of my life that need the light of Jesus? Because sometimes we have darkness in there. We have things that need to be revealed, and God will reveal those. And ultimately, he is the light. And when we follow him, when we follow the light, we'll see this new way of life. We'll see this new way of living. We often call it the ABCs of salvation. If you're watching this later or listening here today, it's, you know, what number one is we admit. We admit that we're a sinner and we've made mistakes. We've sinned. You know, and that's the first step of salvation is like looking at the stuff Jesus reveals in the light. And then we believe. We believe that Jesus is God's only son and that he chose to die on a cross for us. And so, and with that, then I think the A and the B are good, but a lot of us don't move to C, which is commit. We commit ourselves to a life of following Jesus and serving. And a lot of American Christians stop at A and B because, you know, the way of following Jesus, it's a full life, but at times it's a difficult life, right? Because it means you have to live differently in this world. You know, you read the Sermon on the Mount, some tough stuff in there, but it's a better way of life. It's this better way of living. And then ultimately, you know, we can pray something like this. This is, God, I know I've sinned against you. I believe Jesus came and died on a cross for me. I commit my life to following you from this day forward. And then if you pray this kind of prayer, if you make this kind of commitment, please talk to us. Call Connect Card or come help us, come connect with us so we can help you grow in your faith.